The women's 60-meter hurdles final at the Muller Indoor Grand Prix Glasgow was one of those races where execution mattered more than raw speed, and where the difference between victory and defeat was defined by how efficiently each athlete managed the six-step rhythm between barriers rather than by maximum velocity alone. At the center of this performance stood Christina Manning, who delivered a race that can be dissected almost frame by frame as a model of indoor hurdling efficiency. Her reaction phase was immediate and decisive, not just fast in absolute terms, but aggressive in intent, which is critical over 60 meters, because hesitation of even a fraction in the first step disrupts the entire stride pattern into hurdle 1. Manning's first 3 steps were powerful yet controlled, allowing her to arrive at takeoff distance without adjustment, and that is one of the hidden markers of elite hurdlers. No stutter, no reach, no compromise in posture. Her takeoff mechanics into the first barrier were nearly optimal. The angle of projection remained low, which preserved horizontal momentum, and her lead leg snapped down quickly, minimizing flight time. This is where races are often won, because every extra millisecond in the air is effectively lost velocity, and Manning's clearance was not just clean, it was efficient in terms of energy transfer. She landed already transitioning into sprint mechanics rather than rebuilding speed. Sharika Nelvis matched her through the opening phase, which is not surprising, given her reputation for rapid turnover and aggressive hurdling cadence. However, the subtle difference emerged after hurdle 2, where Manning maintained stronger horizontal projection, while Nelvis began to lose marginal ground. This was not due to a major technical flaw, but rather a slight inefficiency in the transition phase. Her step frequency remained high, but the amplitude of each stride was fractionally reduced, meaning she covered less ground per step. By hurdle 3, the separation was established, and indoors, that moment is decisive, because there is no back straight to recover, no extended phase to reaccelerate. Everything compresses into rhythm, maintenance, and technical precision. Manning's ability to sustain identical stride spacing between hurdles created a visual sense of control, while Nelvis was forced into a slightly reactive pattern, adjusting rather than dictating the race. The most critical segment came between hurdles 4 and 5, where many athletes tighten due to proximity of the finish and rising tension in the shoulders. Manning showed exceptional composure. Her upper body remained relaxed, her arm carriage stable, and her trail leg recovery compact, which is essential because any delay in bringing the trail leg through increases ground contact time and disrupts cadence. She avoided the common error of attacking the final hurdle with excessive reach, instead maintaining her established rhythm, which allowed her to exit the last barrier already accelerating. Isabel Pedersen produced one of the most technically consistent races in the field, and her personal best of 7.93 was not accidental, but the result of disciplined mechanics. Her approach lacked the explosive opening speed of the American athletes, but she compensated through precision. Her hurdle clearance was extremely economical, with minimal vertical displacement and almost no lateral deviation, which is especially important indoors, where visual alignment with the lane influences balance and rhythm. Pedersen's step pattern remained consistent across all 5 barriers, and this consistency allowed her to build momentum relative to athletes who were technically faster but less stable. Her race illustrates a key principle of indoor hurdling, that technical cleanliness can offset differences in raw acceleration, especially when the race distance limits opportunities for correction. Nadine Visser finished just outside the podium in 7.99, and her performance reflected an athlete in transition toward elite status. Her mid-phase mechanics were strong, particularly between hurdles 2 and 4, where she demonstrated good stride elasticity and coordination. However, her clearance height was slightly higher than Manning's, and that additional vertical movement translates directly into time loss because it reduces forward velocity even if the difference appears minimal visually. Visser's race also showed a slight delay in trail leg recovery, which increased contact time after landing and forced minor adjustments into the next step cycle. These are the kinds of inefficiencies that are magnified in a 60-meter race, where there is no margin for cumulative error. The presence of Brianna Rollins McNeil added another layer of interest as an Olympic champion. Her outdoor credentials were unquestioned, but indoor hurdling presents a different challenge. The reduced distance demands sharper neuromuscular responsiveness and faster decision-making at each barrier in this race. She appeared slightly conservative in the opening phase, which immediately placed her at a disadvantage. And once the initial rhythm is compromised, it becomes extremely difficult to re-establish optimal spacing between hurdles. Her technique remained fundamentally sound, but the lack of early aggression meant she was reacting to the race rather than controlling it. And in a field of this depth, that distinction determines outcome more than absolute ability. The winning time of 7.79 was not only fast but contextually significant, placing Manning among the leading contenders of the 2018 indoor season and demonstrating that her technical model was scalable to championship settings. What stands out biomechanically is her ability to preserve horizontal velocity across each clearance phase, while other athletes experience small but cumulative decelerations. This preservation is the defining metric of elite hurdling efficiency. Another dimension of this race was its depth, with multiple athletes running at or below the 8-second threshold, which reflects the global progression of women's sprint, hurdling no longer concentrated within a single dominant system, but diversified across training methodologies and technical philosophies. Each athlete in this final represented a slightly different approach to rhythm generation, stride length management, and hurdle clearance strategy. The indoor environment at the Emirates Arena intensified these dynamics. The proximity of competitors, the acoustics of the venue, and the visual compression of lanes all contribute to psychological pressure. Maintaining composure under these conditions requires not only physical preparation, but also refined race awareness. Manning's performance demonstrated both as she executed each phase without visible disruption. From a technical standpoint, the decisive factor throughout the race was not maximum sprint speed, but efficiency of movement, particularly the ratio between airtime and ground contact. Time athletes who minimized time spent in the air while maintaining rapid and controlled ground contacts were able to sustain velocity more effectively, and this is precisely where Manning separated herself. Her race can be broken down into a sequence of controlled accelerations rather than discrete phases. Start projection into hurdle. 1. Seamless transition into sprint rhythm. Maintenance through the middle barriers and a composed exit over the final hurdle without mechanical breakdown. Each segment connected without interruption, which is the hallmark of elite indoor hurdling. In contrast, even the smallest inefficiencies among her competitors, whether slightly higher clearance, marginally delayed trail leg recovery, or minor deviations in stride pattern, accumulated over the 5 barriers, creating gaps that could not be closed within such a short distance. This final ultimately demonstrated that in the 60-meter hurdles, success is determined by integration of speed and technique, rather than by either element. Alone the athlete who wins is the one who converts sprinting, ability into uninterrupted forward motion across barriers without loss of rhythm, and in Glasgow, Christina Manning achieved exactly that, delivering a performance that stands as a precise example of how elite indoor hurdling should be executed.